the women were talking about how they love the sexual revolution and that they love to have sex and they're hypersexual and they love it. But then they also turned around and stated how men aren't very special to them. And once again, this goes back down to leading with your sexuality. Something I learned too, like God really worked on this in my heart, was leading with sexuality. What that does is,
they told us the sexual revolution was freedom, but no one warned us about the cost. Empty relationships, emotionally disconnected men, frustrated women, and an endless cycle of desire with no purpose. If you felt like something broke in modern love, this video will show you exactly why.
I always laugh when I get onto this app and see women complaining about how hard it is to find a real man these days, as if you guys weren't literally the cause of their extermination as you pushed for the feminization of men. And anytime somebody actually tried to show any masculine traits, you labeled him as toxic. Yeah, obviously that's going to thin out the dating pool of actual men, because trust me, they're not searching for you, who was posting Harry Styles in a dress acting as though he was some brave hero and then getting mad at everything that masculine men actually stood for. It doesn't work that way. It's actually extremely hypocritical. If you want a real man, then you have to bring something to the table. You have to be the yin to his yang. You have to balance him out. You have to bring femininity with you, not this boss woman mentality where I'm going to be the boss and I'm going to lead the household and he's going to do the chores, but also make sure you pay for all of the dates and make sure you can protect me. No, you don't get to have it both ways. You have to actually bring something to the table. And of course, this goes hand in hand for the men too. The men that will sit there and say that they want a traditional woman and that they want to have a traditional male role. They want to be the leader. They want to make the final decisions, but at the same time, they're not providing anything. You can't be a provider if you live in your mother's basement. You have to actually contribute something to the relationship as well. If you're going out and looking for a woman who you feel should be dependent on you, who you feel should see you as a leader, well, you have to have the ability to lead. You can't be sitting there smoking weed, listening to Andrew Tate and thinking that makes you a real man, because it absolutely doesn't. So often the genders want to just point the finger at one another rather than looking inward and see what it is that they've been promoting. If you're sitting there scrolling on OnlyFans, no, you're not going to find a traditional woman. If you're a woman who's sitting there and trying to buy into the lies of the sexual revolution, no, odds are you're not going to find a real man. It's just, it is what it is, and you have to exemplify what you're trying to attract.
Her argument hits the mark when it calls out hypocrisy on both sides, but it misses the deeper issue. The sexual revolution didn't just blur gender roles, it destroyed the incentives that once supported commitment, responsibility, and family building. By turning sex into something disconnected from duty, bonding, and consequence, we created an emotional marketplace where everyone wants the benefits of traditional relationships without paying the cost. Women were taught to compete with men instead of complement them. Men were taught to chase pleasure instead of carry burden. The result is a clash of incompatible expectations. Women want protection, provision, and leadership, while rejecting softness, cooperation, and submission. Men want admiration, respect, and loyalty, while avoiding discipline, sacrifice, and stability. Her message exposes the contradiction, but it underestimates the structural damage. When sexuality becomes cheap, commitment loses its value. In a world where everything is temporary, replaceable, and reversible, no one feels safe investing for the long term. What we're really seeing isn't just a shortage of real men or real women, but an entire culture trained to desire without building, demand without earning, trade instead of stay.
So I was on a debate show, and on the debate, the women were talking about how they love the sexual revolution and that they love to have sex and they're hypersexual and they love it. But then they also turned around and stated how men aren't very special to them. And once again, this goes back down to leading with your sexuality. Something I learned too, like God really worked on this in my heart, was leading with sexuality. What that does is, it only draws men. It will draw a man who wants to take from you, not give to you, right? He wants to take something from you because he is viewing you as something that he will get his needs met from. His darkest sexual desires, sexual immorality, right? Which is him sinning against God, him evolving in some type of relation with you that keeps him in a repetitive cycle of sinning against God, which weakens his spiritual connection to God. And regardless where he is at religiously, a man that's not connected to his creator A man that's involving himself in things that's separating himself from his creator will drive him into feeling a disconnect from himself. And therefore, eventually you're going to lose that man in some way or another. Either one is that if he doesn't go seek the Father, he is going to understand that he has no fulfillment in this relation with you. There's no fulfillment. There's just constant, deeper, darker desire for more and more and more and more and more, because you are an object. You are a body at this point that's there to keep him trying to fill up a void inside of him. And maybe the relationship started because he felt a void inside of him, and then the sexual relationship, he used that dopamine, he used it to try to fill something in that void. But over time, he's going to realize that you're not filling it. Only God can. So either one of two things are going to happen. One, either he is going to then go look for a new woman or more woman outside of the relationship you've had with him or the relations you've had with him. And therefore, that's why men aren't ish to you. But really, you were never pouring into him what his spirit needed. You were only there filling a void. And you were there for flesh-driven motives. So either that's going to happen, or the second thing that's going to happen is that he is going to want you to be better. You know, he is going to look at the relationship and see that there are things you guys need to grow into and grow out of. And therefore, you may be combating with, wait a second, are we outgrowing one another? Because I liked as well as a woman that I was leading with my sexuality, I was leading with my body. And therefore, now that you're requiring of me to do spiritual work or work on things within myself, that wasn't the dynamic I signed up for. Probably because as a woman, especially if she used her body and her beauty for years to get them in, that can seem so unfamiliar. And instead of looking at that in the way of, wow, he wants me to be better, instead you're looking at it in the way of, he's criticizing me, he doesn't like me, he doesn't love me. And that's not the case. The case is that his spirit is starting to recognize that this relationship that I have with you is not making me better, and it's not making you better. It's not fulfilling. Therefore, I want a more fulfilling relationship. Therefore, there's things that need to die, and we need to be born into better versions of ourselves. So I don't desire to have just a sexual relationship with you. I desire to have a purposeful and spiritually meaningful relationship with you. So those are the two things that can happen. What women struggle with, especially those that led with their sexuality, is that one, you don't want to change because you're so accustomed to just leading with lustful factors. And you don't know any other intimacy outside of that. And you don't look at his critique, his criticism, and trying to shape and cultivate you to be better as a form of intimacy. Instead, you look at that as a form of attack. And then two, if he goes and steps out and doesn't want you, you also look at that as a personal attack, instead of looking or reflecting on within yourself that the relationship started with you fulfilling fleshly desires. Therefore, he was already moving as a beast. He was already moving as an animal. He was tapped more into primitive instincts instead of spiritual ones. So therefore, you weren't going to get a well-disciplined man because you didn't start that way. You know, you started off hooking up. You started off that way. So this is all your story as a woman. What you want, your soul needs to reflect that.
This woman's story exposes something the sexual revolution tried to hide for decades. When sex becomes the doorway to a relationship, it also becomes the ceiling of that connection. By encouraging women to lead with their bodies, the movement promised power but delivered disposability. A man who enters a woman's life through raw desire doesn't see her as a partner, but as an experience. And experiences get consumed and replaced. That's not male cruelty. It's human nature. When attraction isn't supported by values, purpose, discipline, and mutual building, the bond collapses as soon as pleasure stops being new. The woman in the video touches something deep when she says, sex becomes an attempt to fill a spiritual void. Men, even those who aren't religious, can tell when something is just stimulation instead of meaning. The outcome is predictable. Either he sinks deeper into excess, chasing bigger doses of the same emptiness, or he wakes up and realizes that kind of relationship doesn't elevate him, doesn't bring order to his life, and doesn't make him stronger. When he wakes up, he starts demanding more than a body. He demands character, maturity, consistency, and a shared vision for the future. That's where many women feel conflicted, because they were taught to believe that being desired is the same as being loved. It isn't. Desire wants to consume, love wants to protect, preserve, and build. The sexual revolution taught women to trade intimacy like a currency, but forgot to warn them that this attracts men who only know how to pay with pleasure, not with commitment. When a man starts asking for growth, boundaries, and depth, it's often seen as rejection, when it's actually an invitation to something higher. But going higher means letting old identities die, and not everyone is willing to let go of the version of themselves that once brought validation. That's why so many modern relationships start intense and end empty. They began in the body and never reached the soul. Men who want something real are looking for women who bring peace, order, partnership, and direction, not just stimulation. The crisis in relationships today isn't a lack of chemistry. It's too much flesh and not enough spirit. The sexual revolution promised freedom, but created people who can't sustain deep bonds because they were never taught that true intimacy begins where pleasure ends and responsibility begins.